Amen. Okay, so I'm John. I think you guys, most of you know that, and my wife, lovely wife, Lisa. And we've covered a lot of material, Prosper, last week, and I'm just going to do a very quick review. I wasn't sure if we were getting any new people, and we still might. So, but anyway, who are the wise? Daniel tells us the wise will understand prophecy in the end time, and the wise are those who are studying prophecy. The framework of Revelation is going to be a basic A, B, and C points that we've covered before. The final 7 years of history, we're going to use the Rosetta principle, where there's 3 languages on the Rosetta Stone. You interpret the unknown one by the 2 that you already know. So that's a solid principle. And the puzzle method, we're going to take pieces we know and start the puzzle until we arrive at the unknown pieces. The points we're going to talk about will be A, B, and C. There's D and E at the end, which I'll discuss. The title of Revelation, the book, is The Revealing of Jesus. Jesus is the only and central focus, really, of the book. And there is something most people, I remember years ago, I was attending a meeting with a non-spirit-filled denomination, people up in the mountains. And I said, I think John was kept alive to see the second coming of Christ. And I went back and referred to John 21:22. This is where Peter, had denied him. He reinstates Peter with the 3, do you love me? And then Peter, in typical fashion, says, well, that's great, but what about this guy? So and he says, what if I want this guy to stay until I come, what's that to you? Paraphrasing. So basically, it's about 75 years from the time that Jesus left the earth until he came in a vision, or maybe I should say John went to see him in a vision. It's really either one. He went to a different dimension of understanding, and he saw what was coming, and he saw the second coming of Christ. So Jesus was not just, blowing some smoke there. He actually kept him alive. He's the only one that was alive then. All the other previous 12, because Judas died, all of them were dead by this time. So only one guy alive. They tried to kill him. They tried to boil him in oil and some other things, and they couldn't kill the guy. So basically, he, remained and was alive to see the second coming of Christ. Pretty outstanding. And another thing to think about is the last words to the church. We have, the red letter edition Bible. And of course, you go through all the Gospels and you see it. And I think it may be interspersed a few other places. But Revelation is the last place that Jesus spoke to the church. So it's, I don't care about that book. Some people, I don't want to know about that book. Well, you're, I guess, in a sense, not knowingly, but they're saying, I don't care what Jesus had to say for the last time. So it's, when you think about it that way. And the topic is prophecy. In other words, the topic of the book of Revelation is really pretty much all prophecy, except for chapter 1, 2, and 3. Chapter 1, John sees the risen Christ. In fact, that's the only, as far as I'm aware, the only time where someone saw the risen Christ in his glorified form after he ascended. So that's quite outstanding right there. But the major topic, besides chapter 2 and 3 about the 7 churches, from chapter 4 and 5, where they see the scene in heaven, until chapter 19, all of that is prophecy and future. And of course, chapter 20, 21, and 22 is way future. So that's at least 1,000 years out there. We're going to study and focus on A, B, and C. And A, B, and C are the beginning, midpoint, and end of the tribulation. It's interesting to think that the rapture is the only prophecy for the church. I could rephrase that. What prophecies are there in the Bible yet to be fulfilled for the church before Jesus comes for us? And the answer of that is none. A lot of things happen in the world, and and a lot of things are leading up to it. But as far as, okay, here's a prophecy, when that gets fulfilled, then we'll know Jesus is coming. We don't have that type of thing. And I believe that the rapture, the taking out of the church, is when the 7 years comes into play, because the last 7 years is strictly for the Jews. It's a Jewish prophecy from Daniel we're going to study today. We're going to see why that's true. So we went over the prophetic puzzle concept last week, and that gives us the framework, like a puzzle that has a frame and you start building it. It's the framework. And the Rosetta principle I was just speaking about. And just to illustrate here, I mentioned A, B, and C is our focus. But if you go out further and further, you see that there's also obviously a millennium, and there is eternity. I hope we all realize there's eternity. Otherwise, I'm not sure what we're doing here. But that's the ultimate goal. Remember, I mentioned the book of Revelation is where everything comes together, the grand central station of prophecy and purpose. And that shows us that, Jesus coming back and setting up his kingdom, and all that's going to result from that is the real purpose of the church and why we're here. Daniel, this is key. You don't have to write this down, but there are 4 big key passages about prophecy, and there's a number of ones in the New Testament. So there's about 6 or 7, depending on how you count them. Only to say that there was 300 prophecies of Christ's first coming, and there's more than that of his second coming. So there's a lot of what we'll call minor prophecies, but there's several key chapters. Daniel is probably the biggest one. Daniel is extremely key in this type of thing. So Daniel is going to be our focus, and I could focus on all kinds of chapters in Daniel. Chapter 1, we have the Daniel fast diet. Chapter 2, we have this huge Colossus figure. Chapter 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6, as you go on, you have prophecies of the various world empires. And then you come to chapter 9, which is later on going to be our real focus today. And then finally is chapter 12, where Daniel's told, well, you saw all these things, the angel showed you these things, write them down, and then forget it. He says, that's not for you, Daniel. It's like for the end times. So Daniel was faithful to write down what he had been given. And the reason he was given it is because he had been studying the prophecies of Jeremiah. So it says in chapter 12, you don't have to go there if you want to, chapter 12. Basically, it says at that time, meaning the end time, Michael, the great prince, protects your people, arise. There will be a time of distress such as not happened from the beginning of nations. This 7 years of tribulation is what the Old Testament prophets call the time of Jacob's trouble, or the refiner's fire. There's a number of labels for it, but the whole idea is that, and the Jews today realize, there's the ones who believe the Bible realize there's going to be a coming time where there's going to be a great persecution of the Jewish people. Obviously not all of them believe that, but the ones who really are devout, study the Bible. So the thing is, we're establishing from the Old Testament as well as the New Testament what the book of Revelation is teaching us. There's going to be a time in the end, and it's for the people who will be wise and understand these things at the time of the end. Daniel was told to roll up and seal the words of the scroll. This is interesting because in chapters 4 and 5, we see the scene in heaven before the tribulation begins. And they say, who's worthy? Who's worthy to open the scroll? And so Jesus finally, of course, gets the scroll. And what does he? There's 7 seals, and he unseals it. So Daniel's told to seal it up, and Jesus unseals it. So it goes, all prophecy goes hand in hand. But the thing is that it's fairly vague, but most scholars believe, I believe, that what he's saying here in verse 3 is until the time of the end, We are not in it exact. Oh my goodness. Okay, round of applause. Kevin Rushing.
Was able to avoid the Noah's Ark too.
He is actor pro excellence. And what are all your credits? There's so many, I can't even go into it. He did a one-man show of Martin Luther King. One-man show where he was Martin Luther King. And I couldn't even imagine memorizing all that, let alone having a soliloquy. I think that's the right word. In the spotlight by yourself. So hats off. That's all I got to say. Anyway, so my friend, my brother, and tremendous actor. Okay, let's continue on. He's good, but he's not revelation. Okay. Let's see. So anyway, many will go here and there, and they're going to increase in knowledge. And the way I interpret this is many will go. In other words, people are going to start going everywhere. They're going to be moving quickly. And you got to understand, Daniel was given this roughly 500, some people might say, 400, somewhere between 400 and 500 BC. So that's like what, 2,500 years ago, people were really primitive, right? So, I mean, if they could get on a camel or something and travel 5 miles an hour, today we're flying jets, we're going to the moon. So everything he says here indicates we are in that time. But here's the kicker, especially I'm in the IT business, so I understand computers and how they're processing things. And now knowledge shall increase. And last I heard a few years ago, it was every 2.5 years. And then I heard more like 1.5 years. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's every 1 year knowledge increases now, because we have AI, we have all these systems who are not only learning things, but we're putting that knowledge in there. And they have huge, buildings that are just gigantic in the desert, filled with nothing but this knowledge, at least the government does. So if we're not in that time, I'm not sure when it's supposed to start. We're getting there. How long? And he said, well, how long it's going to be, Daniel? And Daniel says, how long are these things going to be? How far out is this? And then the angel gives him a interesting and seemingly cryptic answer, but we're going to see it fits. He says, for a time, times, and half a time. And if you interpret that like many scholars do, that it's talking about years here. The time would be a year times 2 years, and half a time would be half a year. So that adds up to 3.5 years. So what is the length of the Great Tribulation? According to Revelation, 3.5 years. So he got a glimpse here from the angel 2,500 years ago, and 600 years before John got the revelation. There would be a timetable, even though John said, well, how long is it going to be? When's it going to happen? The angel didn't really tell him how long it was going to be. He told him this is the time frame when it's going to happen. So very interesting. We're going to see it all fits perfectly. And then it goes on to deal with there should be a time of distress that has not happened from the beginning. If you read the book of Revelation and the plagues and judgments, tell me when that happened before. Giant 100-pound hailstones falling and crushing people, earthquakes leveling cities everywhere. You can just go on and on. I can't even begin to detail all the plague that are going to happen. And so, he's saying, listen, these things, have never happened before. I guess another way to look at this is when it happens, you're going to know it's happening. It's like, I wonder if we're in the tribulation. Well, has a 100-pound hailstone fallen on your head lately? Have all the rich men went into caves and they're hiding in caves because they're so afraid? No. Okay, so we're not in the tribulation. Do not be fooled. But anyway, so if we keep on going, it says here that knowledge is going to increase. It tells us how long it's going to be. But then he says, the angel says, roll up the scroll and seal it until the time of the end, because None of the wicked will understand. Boy, isn't that true today? Not a one of the worldly pundits, news people, they have no idea what Revelation's about. They have no clue. But the wise, those studying prophecy, studying the word in particular, but studying prophetic things and looking around, it's not just a theoretical thing. They're looking around and going, wow, something's happening here. They're awake. So here we go. Daniel 9:24. This is the kind of the meat I wanted to get to today after our review. And Daniel 9:24 is where 24, 25, 26, and 27 is where we see the angel lays out for Daniel a timetable that is very explicit. So he tells them in terms of a Hebrew word, the Hebrew there is Shavuah, which means a 7-year period. If you go back to, remember Jacob and Leah, he said, okay, marry her for 7 years, and then you can have, but I got him backwards. Rachel's the one he got second, and it's one he wanted, right? And so, and then he had to work another 7 years. Well, that word is Shavuah. It's the same exact word. So basically he's saying from the time, and he gives them a timetable, from the time that the decree is going to go out to rebuild Jerusalem. And Daniel's in captivity. Keep in mind, Daniel and Ezekiel and some of the other prophets have been taken out of a destroyed Israel, Jerusalem, and Judah, and they've been taken to Babylon. They're captives in Babylon, and they were freed from that around 500, and they didn't just all go back at once, but over time, more and more of them went back to the promised land. But the thing is that we have a timetable of 70 weeks, and if we understand 70 times 7 is 490. So he's saying there's a timetable of 490 years, and that after 69 weeks of Shavuos, which is 483 years from the starting point, then Messiah is going to be cut off, but not for himself, to pay the price, the sins of the people. And so, in other words, the time of Jesus' first coming was predicted down to the very year and the week. Because this prophecy is a prophecy that is in, I don't think I wrote it down in here, Nehemiah 10:2. Yeah. So Artaxerxes in Nehemiah 10:2, it's written down in scripture, who was the Medo-Persian king, gave them an edict, a kingdom-wide edict. Of course, in those days, if the king said it's an edict, that's it. Nobody questioned it. So he said, go back and rebuild the walls in the temple. And of course, Nehemiah was in there. But so basically, from that time, which is a definite time in history, that's why he was given this. From the time Artaxerxes gave the edict, there would be 483 years until Messiah came into Jerusalem, riding on the donkey and being crucified. So the people, they really, without excuse, any of the Jews would be without excuse, because they all, if they'd studied the scripture, understood anything, they would have got this. But amazingly, they did not. So I think some might have. But, and it makes me wonder if, who are those two Sanhedrin guys? The tomb guy and the other guy, Joseph of Arimathea. Don't tell me, Joseph Arimathea. You know the other guy? I have a mental blank. Thank you. How could I find Nicodemus? Okay, I suspect that they probably knew this prophecy. I'm just suspecting, but I'm sure, some of the other ones, they may have even known it, but because they didn't like Jesus, they said, oh, that can't be the guy. I know it says he's coming this week, but that can't be the guy. So, that's the way people are. So at any rate, so they knew that, but then the focus for us is the fact that that's past history. We know that happens, whether we know the prophecy or not, we know it happened, we believe it. But then what they didn't understand back then is that there would be this huge gap. Paul writes about it in Romans 11, where the Jews were going to kind of be set on the back burner, and the Christians, the Gentiles, would be grafted into the tree. But God didn't kill the trees. He didn't forsake the Jews. He grafted us in. So we're part of that now. But they still have a time in the future where their final prophecy will be fulfilled. Because it says here that this prophecy is for thy people, Daniel. Well, at the time this was written and in context, there's only thy people can only mean one thing. That's the Jews. There were no other people. So he says this prophecy is for your people, Daniel. And then after Messiah is cut off and denied his messianic kingdom, then it says, and the people of the other prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Okay, so who came when Jesus was crucified, and as he predicted in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, he predicted that the temple, remember he walked out of the temple when he gave his end time prophecies, and he said, look at these temples, a beautiful stone, how wonderful it is. And his disciples asked him three questions, when's all this going to happen? What's the timetable? When you coming back? And although he's going to answer that, the first thing he did is see this temple up there. He said it's going to be destroyed. Not a stone will be standing. You gotta understand, this was like, it's worse than 9/11. This was one of the wonders of the world, the temple in Jerusalem, and it took I think 40 years to build it. It was actually refurbished by Herod. But the thing is that it happened exactly as he prophetically predicted. From the time that he went up until the city was surrounded by the people of the prince who would come. And what people surrounded Jerusalem, destroyed Jerusalem, burned it to the ground, burned the temple to the ground, knocked all the stones down. And then it's recorded, I think Josephus, that the Roman soldiers took knives and scraped the gold off of all the stones so that there was nothing left of the temple. So it went from the most magnificent thing in the Middle East, if not the world, to a pile of rubble, as he predicted. So, but the people of the prince who would come. So who were the people that came and destroyed the temple? The Romans, Titus and the Roman legion. Actually, his father Vespasian started, but then he got called to Rome to become Caesar, and then his son Titus destroyed it. But anyways, huge army destroyed it all. So what is going to happen in the future is there's going to be a prince who was from the people who destroyed the city and the temple in whatever form. So is it going to be the Romans? I don't think the Italians are up for it. So it's obviously has a greater fulfillment than that. But basically, what's going to happen is there is another 7 years, which a Shabbat, it's unfulfilled on this prophecy. God doesn't make a prophecy and it gets all the way up to, 483 years. And he predicted 490 and he goes, good enough, close enough. He doesn't work like that. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen in the future. And this is the key to understanding the book of Revelation. If you don't understand this, you're not going to understand Revelation. And Jesus, we're going to see, he referred back to this prophecy when he was talking end times, because he was well aware of this. Well, he wrote the word. So, but anyway, so basically, the destruction is coming upon the Jewish people at the end of time. And they are going to be rewarded at that time, at the end of the prophecy, to see the second coming of Christ. Okay, the final 7 years. What I'm really trying to do is show from the history of the prophetic word, Old Testament and New Testament, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of prophetic writing. They all say the exact same thing, and the idea is, people say, oh, well, somebody wrote those books years and, centuries later, which is total nonsense. But, and today with archaeology and everything else, the Dead Sea Scrolls, Qumran scrolls, the idea that somebody wrote this stuff thousands of years later is ridiculous. But, uneducated and ignorant secular people still hold on to this because it supports their doctrine of I am God and do what I want to do. That's what it's all about. They reject Christ because they just want to do what they do. They're of the spirit of Satan. That was Satan, right? I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to be God. And that spirit is in every secular, unsaved person in the world. But anyway, let's continue on with this just to look at, oh my goodness, the time is flying. Let's see, we have several major passages. We're going to look at Ezekiel, Matthew 24, which is the end times discourse of Christ. And then, of course, we're going to get into Revelation. before I get too far, any questions? I know I have a tendency to go through this material because I know time is short. Any questions? No question, it's too stupid. Believe me, I've asked them. All right, Kevin, I know you got a question. I can see those wheels, man. Okay. Anyway, okay. Ezekiel 38 and 39, we're going to see something that is the focus, I believe, and something personally I haven't read anywhere. I was reading it one day and I saw it. This is it. So it's not to say somebody else hasn't seen it, but basically in 38 is what most people consider probably, if they're thinking about Armageddon, to be Armageddon, right? And the Jews in Israel often relate to this when they're talking about the future big time war, rabbis such. 38 and 39. Key to understanding this is that in the original scrolls, there are no chapter and verse divisions. In fact, there's no books. It's literally a scroll. So when they found these scrolls in Qumran community up in the caves, they're just old, deteriorating. A lot of them were vellum, animal skins are written on. They're written on, some of them on, copper or whatever. So, basically, as Jesus went to the temple, same thing. When he was asked to read from, the book or whatever, there was no book. We get these ideas. Oh, he got up the King James and went and he found the verse in a chapter. No, he didn't. And as far as I know, still in all the synagogues today, they have the Holy Scroll. Okay. And it's literally a scroll with wooden stoles, right? They have to go through it and, till they find the passage. That's what he did. Basically, without chapters and verses, what we have is a continuum of ideas. And so about, I want to say 1400, somewhere in there, a fellow put in the chapters. Actually, it's probably a number of people. And then the verses came a little later, a couple hundred years, they put in the verses, which is great. Now I can say go to Ezekiel 38:9, 39:9. But before that, there was no such thing. And so the problem with that is that you have a tendency to think that's some kind of God thing. And so you read 38 and you're going, I see this is a Ezekiel 38 prophecy. Oh, chapter 39. And in other words, you don't bother reading the rest. In the temple, they would have read it all because it's all one thought. It's not two thoughts. So God bless the editor that put it in there, but that sometimes it causes us to stumble. If you read Ezekiel 38, what you find there in a nutshell is at the end of times, nations are given that are going to come down. Rosh, it's in chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Rosh is the ancient name, or it actually literally means in Hebrew the most high, or the highest northern point. And if you go take a line, draw it from Jerusalem up to Moscow, there's nothing above Moscow. It is the most northern point. Meshech is the ancient name of Moscow, and Tobolsk is the ancient name of the largest capital city in eastern Russia. So Meshech and Tubal are Moscow and Tobolsk. Second name's almost the same. But at any rate, so those are going to come down, and it names all the ancient nations by the table of nations of people groups, because you couldn't name a country borderline, because that has changed 10 times since this was written. So basically you have Russia, who's going to be a covering. He's going to be the one motivating and taking care of all these people over Persia. Persia in those days would have been part of Turkey, Iran, especially Iran, and Afghanistan, and probably part of Pakistan. I mean, it was a pretty big deal back then. So those ancient peoples covered that. And then Togarmah, that's Turkey and even more area. So Russia is going to guard Iran and take care of Iran, who's going to be in league with Togarmah, which is Turkey, and Gomer, which is the East Bloc Arabic nations, heavily, mostly Muslim. And then you have, interesting enough, two nations down here in Africa, Northern Africa, which one still has the name, but it's not the same territory. It says Ethiopia. Did you understand the ancient map of Ethiopia would have included Somalia and what is the nations that chat? What's directly, You probably know, but directly west of Ethiopia, what's the next nation? You have an idea?
Ethiopia, we have Eritrea.
Oh, yeah, that's what, yeah. So whatever map I might be thinking of, that map's already changed. But anyways, that shows the wisdom of God. In other words, it's really going to be, when it says Libya and it says Ethiopia in the prophecy, those are the ancient people groups, but it probably pretty much covers all of North Africa, at least the North African Muslim, primarily Muslim nations. But one nation is left out. And what in the world, the biggest thing we talk about all the time, it's in the news all the time, it's not even mentioned. Can anybody think of it? Egypt. Egypt. I mean, they're a gigantic Muslim power, you know, they have other groups, but so anyway, so that's strange. Think about that. So this alliance of Russia backing what amounts to all Muslim powers, all these other nations are Muslims, coming down against Israel to destroy it. And Egypt is kind of reserved. You could see in Daniel 11 that it mentions the fact there's going to be an end time war at the end of the 7 years where Egypt is involved in some way. So it's kind of reserved for the end. But the point I want to make is this war in Ezekiel 38 is not Armageddon. Okay, Armageddon, and later on in the course I have more graphics and everything, but Armageddon is only at the very end of the 7 years. Christ comes back to earth to rule, and all, A-L-L, nations of the world come against Jerusalem. This war here is only 5, am I getting right? 5? Let me count them. Russia, Iran, Gomer, okay, 6. 6 nations coming down against Israel. And at the end of this, 1/6 of the Russian army goes back up to Siberia because they've been totally defeated. And Jesus doesn't come back. In other words, so I have a chart where I show that this war, I call it World War III, just my name, could be called anything. But World War III and Armageddon are totally distinct. Many prophetic scholars don't understand that. They think that World War III is Armageddon, but it's not, okay? So, and here's the main proof of it right here, if you keep reading to the next chapter, like I talked about. If you read, this is all one thought, nothing stopped here. It's all talking about the war and the aftermath of the war. It says after this war is done, for 7 years, the people in the cities in Israel are going to go out and, I mean, it says burn with fire the weapons. Fire is not going to destroy a lot of weapons. But, you know, this is in terms of what a 2,500-year-old man would have understood. So somehow I think they're going to decontaminate and probably melt them down, but this is the language God used. So basically, the important thing is after this war, which is going to be very destructive for a lot of places in the Middle East and North and South, it says they're going to in some way try to take care of these weapons for how long? How long is the tribulation? 7 years. So where does this war have to take place? At the beginning or the end of tribulation? It's got to be the beginning. You know, you can say, oh, well, maybe it's not. And, you know, Jesus lets him carry on like that for 7 years after he's king in Jerusalem because, you know, he wants to give him something to do. Nobody's going to believe that. So scholars got this all mixed up. So basically what's going to happen is this war is going to be the first event of the tribulation. And that's why I said earlier that the rapture and the beginning of the tribulation are the same point. They're point A. In other words, there are two sides of the same coin. When the church goes out, Jesus, God will start dealing directly with the nation of Israel. So we're going to see later that in the wilderness there was 2 silver trumpets. Numbers 10 2. I got it mixed up. Nehemiah 2:2 was the other one. Numbers 10:2 is this reference. There were 2 silver trumpets that they made. And I like to think about the old wagon train series. You guys are too young to remember that. But they, you know, the Westerns, other ones did the same thing. As the wagon trains were going out west, they had Native Americans that sometimes would attack them. So what they did is circle the wagons. We still use that phrase, it's like circle the wagons, you know, basically. And there was a signal the old West, the wagon train master, right? It used to be Ward Bond in this movie. But anyway, he would tell them, okay, circle the wagons. That was like the command to make the wagons, prepare the camp. And then when at the end of that movie, in that time where they're showing this, and it's time to move on, he would say, westward ho! And they would all, uncircle the wagons to take off. Okay, well, that's like this. The 7 years for the Jews, these two trumpets, the two trumpets were only blown at Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets. And the church is called out by a trumpet, okay? But there's two of them. So the trumpet for the church is the last event for the church. That same trumpet is the first event for the Jews. And then there's another trumpet at the end of the 7 years, which is in Matthew 24, 29 or 32, right in there, where basically it says that when Christ comes back to earth, a trumpet's going to sound. That's the last trumpet. And so what is the purpose? The Jews are the ones that are heading westward ho into their promised millennial kingdom. And so when the trumpet sounds, the Jews will be brought into a 7-year period of circling the wagons and getting ready to receive Messiah. And at the end of the 7 years of preparation, that whole 7 years has only one purpose: to prepare the Jews. It's not for us. We don't need any preparing. We're born again. We're going to have, new forever bodies. We don't need to be prepared. But the Jews, vast majority of them, don't know Messiah. But after the end of this 7 years, as we're going to see it, they're all going to know Messiah. The ones that are still alive, only a third of them will make it through, but they're going to get it. So anyway, Jesus says in Matthew 24 that we should go back to Daniel. We're just looking at Daniel. So I don't know if that has any relevance. We'll talk to Jesus. Jesus wasn't sure about what he's doing here. No, that's not true. He knew exactly what he was doing. So basically he's saying, I'm going to give you guys the answer to your question. This would have been Tuesday evening before he went to the cross. It's called the Olivet Mountain Sermon, and where he was asked, what are the end times going to be? And then he starts talking, and this, what I'm showing you here, is what he said. He basically said that in the beginning of all the, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Well, let's see. Okay, guys, I think we're going to have to start here next week, and so we're going to basically finish the Matthew 24, and there's a lot of meat there, and show how from his prophecies here that it's telling us how to interpret Daniel and how to dovetail Daniel into Revelation. That's the important part. Okay, any questions?